Obviously we're here to talk about smartwatch forensics, cleverly titled Who Watches the Smartwatches? Very, very brief list of topics that we're going to go over today, pretty much talking about Pebble, the band, ways to protect your data, future goals of mine, and any questions if we have time to go through the actual questions. So as Dave very nicely said, I am Brian Moran. I am indeed. Spent 13 years active duty in the Air Force. 10 of that was doing mobile forensics and unofficial DFIR type work. I don't like certifications at all. However, I am a unofficial Forecast Award winner for the best Photoshop of Lee Whitfield. And I worked primarily through my Air Force stuff. I worked at NSA Texas, which if you've never been to NSA Texas, looks the same as it does in Maryland, just with ridiculously oversized cowboy hats on it, because that's everything in Texas. One of the places that I also most recently worked until, unfortunately, yesterday was I was the campaign manager for one Sarah Edwards. We gave it a good fight. We just unfortunately lost to the FBI pretty much. So throughout my talk, I used primarily Galaxy Note 2, rooted it, running just a base version of Android. I used the Pebble Time, I used the Microsoft Band, and that was pretty much it with the actual hardware that I used. For software, I used a bunch of free applications that, once again, not paying for anything, just trying to make it as open source as completely as possible so that way I can go through the data. Just like we've talked about many, many times throughout the summit so far, is I want the raw data and I want to go through it myself. I don't necessarily want to trust a tool to tell me what the data is. So there's just a listing of the software that I used. Thanks very much. Heather Mahalik actually gave me some iOS data from the Pebble that I sent her. She synced it with her iPhone. So because of that, it only cost me a couple pairs of my awesome leggings that I have to wear since I had hip surgery about a month ago. And also, Heather does not know this, but let's make her next year for Book of the Year. Let's make that happen. Let's start right now. And fortunately, Heather and Hillary both start with H, so they already have a logo made. I just had to throw a couple of mustaches on it, and it was perfect. Fantastic. So what was not used? I didn't use Celebrite at all because I wanted to prove that you could do it for essentially pretty much free. And during the course of my presentation, no lying dormant cyber pathogens were harmed. So once again, just wanted to make sure that throughout the course of this, it was all open source and all completely essentially as open source as possible. So I purposely chose the Microsoft Band and the Pebble because they actually had apps for all of the different operating systems on the phone. I didn't want something that was proprietary like the Apple Watch or the Samsung Watch because they're primarily locked down to work best with the actual phone itself. So I wanted something that was as cross-platform as possible. So why would we use smartwatches? Honestly, one of the biggest reasons is instead of having to pull the phone out of your pocket, you get a little notification on your wrist when something happens. Like here, Stacy sent me an email about a fun poster that she wanted me to see. So of course I had to open the poster, and this in a slide pretty much describes me. I am a peacock leprechaun. Like there is no really better description of me than a peacock leprechaun. So of course Stacy had to send that to me. We also use the smartwatches for fitness tracking. A lot of people in the United States and pretty much all over the world are becoming more and more morbidly obese. So we buy smartwatches because we want to get in shape, like Rotato Chip Lee Whitfield, working out at the gym. So that's why we would use smartwatches, because one day I hope to be as ripped and shredded as Rotato Chip Lee Whitfield. Maybe you want to go for a bike ride on the weekend. Maybe you just feel the need to go for a bike ride. You can use your smartwatches to track that. You want a picture? Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll wait for you, Jared. I'll wait for you. We're good? All right. So maybe you enjoy playing golf. You want to use a smartwatch to track your round of golf. Maybe you like running, and you want to track your run. It kind of helps to have a little motivation behind you with a big, giant dinosaur. But hey, some people enjoy running. Maybe you love listening to sweet, sweet music by Rick Astley, but you decide that you actually want to change from Rick Astley to the newest pop sensation that is hitting the DFIR community, Heathers and the Forensic Femmes. Maybe you want to listen to the sweet tunes that they have presented for us. Maybe you're like me. This was pretty much me last night. Pretty much me throughout the whole course of the summit. You are just exhausted and you want to track your sleep. So however you end up after your night of various unicorn shenanigans, hopefully nobody got digital herpes through the course of any of this presentation. But maybe you end up and want to track your sleep. So there's a wide variety of reasons to actually use the smartwatches. Here's some of the specs for the Pebble Time. It's a lot of detail. They actually don't publish a whole lot of it open source, so it's pretty difficult to find. Pretty much the main thing is they got decent battery lives and there's a little bit of storage on the actual device itself. However, the one thing that I will say about it is that most of the data is actually stored on the phone itself that you sync it with, because it essentially just acts as kind of a mirror from the application to send these notifications to your watch. So on an Android device, this is the path where the actual data is stored. Here's just in the File Explorer view, so you can see, once again, pretty straightforward name. That's it, subfolders and all of that. Within that is a whole lot of SQLite databases, because that's what pretty much all mobile devices have now, is they store their data in SQLite databases. So essentially, you just pop open a database and you can parse through it and pull out whatever you want from these SQLite databases. In this particular case, this is pretty much our main database of interest on an Android phone. You can see there's 25 tables, and all of these different tables have all kinds of different data in there that you can build parsers for and go through and pull the data off of them. The Android apps table is a listing of every application and version of the application that was installed on the phone. This is incredibly useful if, for whatever reason, your tool, you need to show the applications that were installed on the phone. You don't have to do X, Y, and Z anymore. You can just go to Pebble and pull this out, because it pulls all of that for you. It stores it all in one very nice, simple spot. Here it is, just in the SQLite database again. The application, the date it was installed, and the version number. It's fantastic for getting a real quick rundown of the applications that were installed on the device. The notifications is the listing of every notification that happened on your phone. So regardless if it was actually sent to your Pebble or not, Pebble records it all. So in reality, Pebble is like a giant DVR for your Android phone. Everything that happens on your phone, weather updates, plugging it in and getting battery charge notifications, getting emails, getting texts, getting Facebook notifications, getting Twitter notifications, anything at all that happens on your phone, Pebble records it and stores it all in their own database for you to go back and pull it out. So obviously, it contains a lot of really, really useful information. So the one caveat with this that I found out through additional research is, even if the user chooses to clear the notifications, it doesn't actually wipe it out from the database. It records the fact that the notification was removed, but it doesn't actually wipe it out from their own database. So this is incredibly useful, obviously, if you have a bunch of text messages that were deleted from the phone and you can't recover them anymore. Pebble has them all for you still. You can go to Pebble. It really is a DVR for your phone. It's scary, the amount of data that Pebble collects. And obviously, I'm not wearing a Pebble anymore, because this freaked me out so bad. It's like, I'm not done. I'm not wearing it again until you guys fix this. The timeline items is the notifications that are actually sent to the device. So we had a whole listing of a whole bunch of various notifications that happened, but in our timeline items, there were very few that were actually sent to the device. It's actually JSON format within the SQLite database, so we can actually use this and see what actual notifications were sent to the device itself. The weather locations is useful if the user travels. You can potentially find out what cities they went to just based off of the weather updates within the database itself. Here's, once again, the date timestamp and the rough location of where it actually was. The SMS messages is the listing of the SMS messages that were sent from the recorded by the device. And once again, just like I said, it actually can record deleted SMS messages that were on the device but are no longer there, but Pebble went ahead and recorded it all for us. Just an example, once again, of the messages in the SQLite database. So a little bit about Pebble on the iOS. This is the primary Pebble database on iOS. It has a very, very different name. It's one thing, like the Hello Barbie talk yesterday, is they noticed that the Android application seemed like it was written like a 5-year-old, and the iOS was actually done pretty well. The same thing here. The Android application is ridiculously bad because it just stores everything like crazy. The iOS one was actually done pretty well. So there's a lot more steps to actually parse the useful data out of the iOS application from the Pebble than compared to the Android, which is completely straightforward. And here's just an example of, once again, the iOS database from the Pebble. So on to the Microsoft Band 2. The main takeaways from this, once again, is there is a very, very little onboard storage. And additionally, unlike the Pebble, there's actually an embedded GPS. So the device can actually pinpoint where you are based off of the device itself. It doesn't actually need a phone to determine your exact location. And once again, the storage path is pretty straightforward. Just make sure it's not emulated. Here's the folder within the file browser again of our particular folder of interest. With this one, our primary folder of interest is actually called response cache, which is found in the subfolder files. This contains JSON formatted data with GUID names. And essentially, you have to go through and correlate to figure out what the GUID name is actually used within the file type itself. It's also very important to note that just because there is actually a response cache, it may not actually have an entry in the SQLite database to correlate it back to, depending on how you actually use your band. So in this particular instance, the very, very simple thing of golf is stored with this very, very long GUID, which maybe, I mean, it fits the 32 characters, so it's probably a hash of some sort-ish of whatever golf is, but I don't know exactly what method that Microsoft is using to determine what that GUID is. So here it is in the SQLite database, and you can see that we have our little, the HTTP queries, and then we have our type as golf, and you can see that that correlates with the GUID. So we open up just the raw file. It's obviously JSON formatted. There's a whole lot of data in there. There's a whole lot of things that you can take a lot of time to parse through and pull out various things. But really the main takeaways from this in particular is the distance is stored in centimeters, which makes no sense at all, but that's how they decided to do it, so that's what they did. In this particular case, I actually shot a round of golf at a golf course. I shot an 85. I did all right until my hip started to hurt because it exploded, which is why I had to have surgery on it a month ago. But I did all right until it really started to get bad. Now, all of that data that is stored rawly on the phone, Microsoft has already built essentially a parser for. It's called Microsoft Health, and this is essentially the web front end to all of your Microsoft band data. So you create your Microsoft account, you log into it, and you're presented with a very nice, easy to understand screen that you can go through and track all of your information, pull all this information out of there. So the golf data was just a big, long blob of JSON data that was all formatted crazy and everything like that. You go to the website, and it's so easy. It looks so nice. Like, honestly, my goal is to eventually write a parser for this and try to make it look like that. But honestly, Microsoft already did it, so I should probably just copy all of their code and use their own data parsing and just do that if Microsoft would share that with us, which they probably never will. So the other thing to notice is the actual app itself also has a very similar format of it makes everything look very nice. It's not the raw data, it's the actual interpretation of that data on the application. And one thing I will point out with this is, despite what this says, I did not hit a 865-yard drive. Like, if I could do that, I would not be here. I would be making ridiculous amounts of money hitting golf balls a very, very long way like Happy Gilmore. That's what I would be doing. So, once again, just remember that although the data is actually stored, the data itself may not always actually be accurate. And you can apply this methodology for anything that the Microsoft band actually does. If you want to track the runs, if you want to track your workouts, sleep, calories burned, steps taken, anything like that, you can track all this information with the same format of correlating what the entry is with the GUID and then going back and actually pulling the data out of there. So in this particular case, this is just an example. So we're looking for our database file that's going to be associated with sleeping. And there is our GUID. So we see that it has sleeping, we have the GUID, so we browse to the folder, we go to the response cache, pull up that file, and there's our information with actual sleeping. Once again, this is just the raw data from the actual response cache. We go to the website, and there's our nice sleep data, all nice and fleshed out for us. Very interesting to note that according to the website, I fell asleep at 12:04. You go to the actual application, and it prints it out the nice same way, except it actually says that it saved it at you went to sleep at 12:05. So the exact same data is actually being translated differently by the application on the phone and the website. The reason for that is, honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer for that, but it's something that you have to take into account when you're actually going through this data, is there might be inadvertent time skew just because of the website translating data or the application translating data. So the best thing to do is take the raw data and just build your format off of that and use what the raw data says, and don't necessarily rely on the application itself or the website to actually do the 100% translation for you. And one of the other things to note is that you can have a whole bunch of connected applications and websites that actually all sync with your Microsoft band, and you can store all kinds of stuff on there, which once again, you now have all kinds of data that you can pull information from. So just like I said, there's a little bit of time skew with the sleep times, so be prepared for that. And unfortunately, the only thing that I do like about the Apple Watch is they actually secure their device. Nobody else really does that right now. Like, I wish there was a way to just lock your band, so if it goes out of range of your phone or something like that, there's no way to get information off of it. Like, I really wish that they would actually come up with some sort of way to actually secure your device like Apple has done with their watch. One of the really important things about this too is if you decide to use your smartwatch and walk around and wear it and everything, you probably want to take it off if you're planning on doing something bad like breaking the law. You probably don't want to have it on because it's another thing that you can potentially be tracked on. And if you're going to lie about something bad happening to you, you probably shouldn't be wearing your smartwatch. This was a case that I believe happened in Pennsylvania. They actually grabbed the Fitbit of the woman who said that a large man wearing boots broke into her house in the middle of the night and raped her. So she was wearing the Fitbit. The cops saw that and said, hey, I want the Fitbit information. And they went through all the data from the Fitbit and showed that she was actually like up and around, walking around with no problem at all. She was not actually lying in bed sleeping when it happened. So she was charged with making false statements and a whole bunch of stuff. And the only evidence was from the Fitbit. So once again, if you're going to do something bad, it's probably best to not wear it. So in order to actually protect your data, you probably want to turn off as many notifications as you can if you want to actually use the smartwatch in any fashion. iOS will not allow you to change some of these notifications, so just be aware of that. If you want to take the security measures and try to change some of them on iOS, you can't. So on the Pebble app, you just navigate to notifications, view the apps, and turn off the apps that you actually want notifications on. So by default, they turn on everything, and everything stays turned on. When you actually get an update of the Pebble Time application itself, it turns everything back on all over again. So every time you do an update, you have to go back and turn off all of the notifications. You should also clear the notifications on a regular basis. Even though it doesn't actually purge the database, it's still a good idea to clear it because hopefully eventually they will fix that. And if you actually start to clear them, it will actually really clear them instead of making a note that it was cleared. And the one thing to note about this is you have to have at least one notification on your watch in order to actually clear the notifications. So here, for example, I have a couple of notifications, Facebook notifications and a Gmail message. I just select clear all, and the notifications will be cleared off the watch. The other thing is if you actually choose to sync your healthcare data, like your actual medical records and all that with Microsoft Health, which Microsoft wants you to do, if you lose control of that, technically you could be held liable for losing your own PHI information. And I mean, Sweet Brown says it better than anybody else in the world. Like there's no reason to do that because if you do, that's just a whole other can of worms and a whole other hole that is potentially just terrible for everybody. You should always use strong passwords. Don't reuse them, especially for the second and third party apps as well. Like everybody knows, use good strong passwords. Like it's just basic information, but use good passwords. Even though it's just a Pebble and like nobody's going to hack into my Pebble, use good passwords for every account that you have. So one of the things that I did have time to put together is I actually put together a small Perl script that should be actually going live right now that is actually going to pull the information automatically. You point it at the databases, the iOS or the Android database, you point it at that, and it will actually parse the data and print everything out nicely and neatly. And I personally chose Perl because it's easier for me because that is my background that I have done most of my coding in Perl. And on the other hand, since we all know that Celebrite won so many awards yesterday, I wanted them to make them work a little bit before actually just taking my raw Python stuff and shoving it into the next release of their physical analyze. Like do just a very, very little bit of work, that's all I ask. So essentially, you just point the script at it, like I said, and it will run, it will generate the folders, it will generate the nice, easy to read HTML output, and it will also, thanks to Heather, will parse the iOS data out. So this is just the example of it running from the command line. It will go through, try to find the tables. If it finds the tables, it will print everything out and parse it in a nice, easy HTML format. For Android, it goes through and does the canned responses, applications, notifications, and phone numbers. Still working on adding more to that. And for iOS, right now, it only does notifications because there's a lot more work in actually getting the data out of the iOS databases. And here's just an example of the nice, easy to read. It just generates a quick HTML, so you can just print it out and look at it, and it will sort it automatically by timestamp, and you can go through and see the notifications. Example of it on iOS. There's actually 2 columns for timestamps, and I haven't been able to do enough testing to figure out which one actually gets populated all of the time. because sometimes the first one does, sometimes the second one does, so I just print them both out and say, you just have to deal with the possibility of looking at potentially 1 or 2 timestamps because they store data in some weird, funky way. So I would very, very much like to try to do more experimentation. I really, really want to try to grab some of the Bluetooth data that goes back and forth because it syncs to the phone through Bluetooth. So I really want to try to capture some of the Bluetooth captures. And I also want to try to work on expanding to other smartwatches. Apple Watch probably will never happen because I am obviously, as you can see from the Android fan, I'm not a huge Apple fan at all. But I might actually spend a little bit of money and build up my own iOS environment so I can do the testing needed to actually try to parse data from the Apple Watches. There is a jailbreak for the original version of the Microsoft band, which allowed root access to the band itself to pull data from it. Everything that I've seen so far, though, is there's really not a whole lot of actual data stored on the band because as soon as it syncs to as soon as it gets in touch with the phone and does the syncing, it pushes all that data up anyway. So it essentially only has enough storage to store what it needs to have until it syncs to the phone and then it erases it. So while there definitely is data on these devices that I would like to get access to, I'm not as concerned about it because all of the actual behind-the-scenes stuff where the data is stored is actually on the applications themselves. And that's pretty much all for that. Does anybody have any questions?
So in the case that you mentioned there where they just use her Fitbit data, I know with the Pebble it does like sleep tracking, but like I'll get up in the morning, maybe let the dog out, and I'll come back to bed. It will say that I got up when I went to let the dog out, but I'm still in bed for like another hour. So what are your thoughts on, I mean, that seems pretty, like just to base a conclusion like that off of a Fitbit band seems pretty serious to me. But I also know that Pebble also released their open source their code on how they actually make all those determinations. So in your testing, how accurate did you find out the step, like, did it seem, you know?
Yeah, so the step counters on the Pebble, not so much. It's just because it essentially has the accelerometer based in, and it kind of like detects your wrist movement or some kind of weird math happens with what they built into it, and that's how Pebble detects the steps. With the band, because it has the GPS in there, and that is accurate like right off the bat. Like that's the one thing that really surprised me with just how accurate. In some cases, I actually did a side-by-side comparison of the band and my phone, and it was actually more accurate than my phone was. In one case where I actually purposely got out my Garmin standalone GPS unit and walked around with that, there were instances where it was actually more accurate. The band was more accurate than the Garmin was, but there was also plenty where the Garmin was much more accurate. So it really depends on how the data is actually being stored. In this particular case, if I remember correctly, she said that she was in bed for like 3 or 4 hours, like sound asleep, and woke up in the middle of the night and was being attacked. She woke up when she was being attacked. And they were able to show, like, you were not asleep, you were, walking around, and I believe they actually were able to show, like, she was walking to different rooms of the house. Like, she walked to the fridge and, like, stood in front of the fridge for a while, and, like, went and, went to the cupboard or something, came back to the fridge, and then was just up and walking around. So it wasn't the fact that she was actually, they made that conclusion just off that. It was the aggregate of, you were obviously not just asleep, like you said. You were obviously up and around doing things. Does that answer? Okay. Heather.
Other questions?
Heather. Thank you. See, look at that. Information sharing, it's fantastic.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.